Investing Insights with Right Property Group, exploring trends in real estate and helping property investors gain financial security.
Good day, how you going? Phil Tarrant, co-host of Property Investing Insights with the crew over at Right Property Group, Reshmi and Victor Kumar joining us in the studio to have a discussion and try and make sense of what's going on with the world at the moment. Team, how's things? We'll get straight into it today because of the significance and the seriousness of the situation we're in. There's be good reason, Victor, to be worried and concerned about the state of the world today. Are you? You seem pretty relaxed.
I'm very relaxed, and there's a song in primary school I learned, "Q Sarah, Q Sarah." It will be what it will be.
Yeah.
And the reality of it is that so long as you stick with strategy, so long as you don't do any panic buying or selling, everything settles into where it needs to settle in. And ultimately, it really comes back to one really simple thing. When you're looking at all of these upheavals, we're talking about obviously the geopolitical issue. We're talking about the cash reserve going to 4.1. We're talking about obviously the impending CGT and negative gearing change that highly likely will happen. And when you look at all of these things, it comes back to, guess what? Affordability, ability to hold into your portfolio, and keeping your mindset clear of the clutter.
So nothing's really changed.
Nothing's changed.
Nothing's changed. So this is part of our Design Your Decade series, and we've been really honing into this for the last year or so, and giving the scaffold and the strategy and the mindset and the tactics to actually craft a decade of effective planning to build out a portfolio for whatever the objective that you have connected with it. And for most of it, it's about long-term wealth creation or being able to generate money in retirement. So over a decade, if you only need to think back for the last 40 years, every single decade, there's something.
Absolutely.
Sometimes there's two things, Reshmi, that come up and throw everything on its head. So designing your decade is absolutely critical. And in designing your decade, you need to be factoring in times and moments and periods of uncertainty.
Yes, uncertainties come all the time. It's not only what's going on out there in the world with the interest rates or the taxation scenarios, anything to do with that relates with property investing, but there's uncertainties as well as how you think about things. So it's your own thoughts and feelings, whether you react to something or you take the strategic approach. That is to keep yourself in check in these times of uncertainty is the most important thing.
So depending on how you choose to view the world, Victor, you can look to retreat at times of uncertainty, or you can look at it as a strategic advantage to capitalize on it. And I know smart investors right now, and we sort of spoke about it before coming on air, are going, hang on a second, never waste a good crisis.
Yep.
Because I think maybe a Winston Churchill quote or a sentiment or a mantra. But certainly a crisis ahead of us right now. Is it really a crisis? Well, it depends what your version or variation of a crisis is, and we'll chat about what that crisis is manifesting in. But this is certainly a mindset time. It
is definitely a mindset, right? So if you look back and look at history as the teacher, if you look back at the Great Depression, you look back at the recession we had to have, the GFC, then COVID, people that had a knee-jerk reaction actually missed out on some phenomenal growth. And they also missed out on the ability to capitalize on the situational aspects of property investing. And this is where we really need to be taking a approach that, okay, if you look at history, most of these upheavals have lasted maximum 18 months. Then it starts to peter out. Now, it might feel like it's lasting longer than that because we need to ramp up to that massive big hit of interest rate, inflation, fuel crisis, all of those things, right? And then it may last 18 months from there. So the ability really needs to be to, first of all, handle your mindset and make strategic moves now. And this is something that, if you're listening to the podcast this month, you really need to start making moves to strategize for what's coming. And let's hope that doesn't really come in its full force, but there will be opportunities there. So we need to fix our mindset, then we need to fix our foundations, and then wait for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But
So-
if you don't have that ready now, you've probably already missed the boat, right?
Correct.
In terms of having the right mindset and making sure your foundations are right.
Yep, true. Never lose the big picture why you're investing. And so you've got to make sure that when you're feeling uncertain about things, you talk to the people around you, the professionals who can bring some certainty into, they can bring out the numbers and work it out for you to see exactly where you sit, so that you know what your actions could be, whether it is for you to really wait, or whether you can, the certain uncertainties that you're feeling are not really impacting you as far as you're concerned with growing your portfolio.
So a lot of the times, and again, there's a mindset thing, a lot of those uncertainties might be up in between your ears, and those uncertainties might not actually be real or realistic. And often it's hard to cut through the noise to get a clear line of sight on things. So let's have a chat about all the reasons why to be uncertain in this market right now. And I can't remember a market like this, Victor, even. It's very, very different than COVID again. And we're recording this a few days after the sort of head energy guy globally was in Australia talking to the Prime Minister and a whole bunch of other folk, and his view at that time was this current energy crisis we're facing is worse than the two energy crises that took place in the 70s combined together, and he's sort of really telegraphing Armageddon, you know, for the economy and plunging us. And I think back in the 70s went to global recession or double dip recession. You know, he's telegraphing sort of similar dire doomsday type sort of scenarios. Now, if we think back to the most immediate significant crisis we had, the COVID pandemic, at this point in the cycle, when it was just the onset of it, we were being told by the major banks to expect 30%, 40% decrease in property price values. And I think we sort of gave some sensible narrative and commentary at that point in time. But here we are again with another crisis, different crisis, but another crisis, which for all the reasons why everyone would emotionally sort of consider, say, stop doing everything and wait.
Yeah.
So how big do you think this crisis is with a view towards property markets?
Okay. So the very first thing I'll say, there won't be a 30 or 40% dip. Yep. Unlikely. And of course, properties that are illiquid, properties that are absolutely hemorrhaging cash flow, yes, you'll have a deep discount. But generally, it won't be the case. Yeah. We are coming off the back of huge equity gains thanks to COVID. And so there's a lot of buffering that people do have. And our education process in terms of property investing is top notch in most countries. There is not as much education as there is in Australia in terms of property investing, good or bad. Yeah. And so we've got a lot of people that are well educated and well versed with, okay, do I tack? Do I stop? Do I use this as an opportunity piece? And then given the fact that now there is more and more investment savvy brokers out there, it is a matter of just resetting the platform. So first of all, there won't be a 30 or 40% drop. I don't believe so. Having said that, if you are against the wall cash flow wise, you've got some very strong headwinds coming your way, right? So not only are we talking higher interest rates and there's absolute certainty that we'll have quite a few rate rises this year, you are also getting into major headwinds in terms of inflation, because the knock-on effect of petroleum and its byproducts is not only felt in just at the Bowser, it will also be felt in right down to Woolies, where transportation for veggies, farmers not being able to plant in time because of fuel crisis, and then flow on from there into the building trade, where we will have another price rise in terms of cost to build, which we need to take all of this into account and say, okay, what's my plan for the next 18 months, 2 years? Do I do a pause, which Reshmi and I were discussing that you should not really pause unnecessarily. Do I need to pivot the strategy a bit to take into account the opportunities such a market brings? Do I need to pivot to defend what I've already got? Or do I need to strategically advance my portfolio by cashing up and waiting for the right opportunities to come my way?
Yeah, and all of them are relevant and sensible scenarios or strategies as long as you're deploying the right one for the right reason.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is core principles. You cannot let that slip by. You have to stick with it and have to remember your own position and know your own numbers, knowing where you stand, and then you can work out whether it is the right thing for you to do. If you're sitting on the fence, for example, if you have the ability to afford the property, then you can go ahead and buy, but not rushing into buying something. Again, coming back to strategy, strategically buying, not reacting and not panicking. So that's the way to go, keeping in mind the strategy, the long-term goal, and these things will stabilize and they always will be there, no matter when you look at, like, every single time in history, there's always been something going on that affects, and it doesn't affect just the property investors, it affects everyone in every sort of way. But where the property investors are concerned, there's a lot of money is involved. So when you look at your cash flow or the ability to hold your when your repayments go up, you've just got to make sure that you have enough in there, or we say like 3 times the ability to afford is there, so that you know that you can afford to buy a property or hold on to that portfolio, and stop panic selling is another thing when people see things like this. The problem is, what has happened is, over the last couple of years, too many things have happened too quickly. It hasn't. There hasn't been enough time for people or things to settle down. Last year, I think people were thinking things were settling down, the rates were started to come down, and now suddenly this has happened. So it's just shaken people, and so they're really questioning themselves whether I should be doing this or whether this is the right thing to do. So the idea is not to forget the strategy and the long-term goal.
A lot of the information that you're probably consuming now across whichever sort of media you choose to get your information from is this idea around resilience for Australia.
Yep.
And this being another sage reminder around Australia's need to be resilient, and sort of a sovereign resilience, as in can look after itself in times of crisis, and is another sage reminder around it. But this notion of resilience is a really important term when it comes around property investing, and we've spoken about it. That's really at the core of the Design Your Decade series, is how do you build a resilient portfolio, and what does resilience mean? It gives you the ability to buttress or defend against issues when they arise and capitalise on them when they do arise as well. So if you do not have a resilient portfolio, that means you're at the begs and whims of the market.
Yep.
Whereas a resilient portfolio puts you and allows you to be on the front foot. And if you can think about embracing this idea of sovereign resilience in your portfolio, which is what the Australian government should be focusing on, is how do they make Australia resilient? That's where the core is. Now, what you only hear the sort of fringes, Victor, of the maybe not the extremes, but the fringes or the outliers around what is a norm in property in Australia, and what we're constantly told is that property is unaffordable. Property is out of the reach of most Australians. There's generational inequality, and that's really, really unfair. And all these things which are headline grabbing type scenarios, which politicians normally put the hooks into and use it to repeat and regurgitate, right? The reality is that Australian real estate is pretty bloody resilient, right? The LVR, I think Australian real estate is like 27%, right?
Correct.
So there's heaps of equity in there, right? And we don't hear a lot about it these days, but it's something that come out when we're coming out of COVID and this idea of a mortgage cliff, that the Australians are going to be hemorrhaging money everywhere. Like, there's still a heap of money sitting in offset accounts. There's still a lot of people well ahead on their mortgages. There's still a lot of people who have a resilient family balance sheet and a resilient family footing that allows them to govern their situation when it comes to crises and give them stability and certainty moving forward. What the media will tell you is that you think everything is wrong, but there's a lot about the Australian property market and Australian real estate investors, whether owner occupiers or investors, that they're reasonably resilient. You know, I haven't heard any of the banks come out saying this is dire, we're going to have to foreclose everything and everyone's going to go out of the bus. So let's put it in the context, right? You know,
that's right.
But that's reality.
Yeah, that is reality. And you know, we had this so-called mortgage cliff that was going to happen. It was going to be the Armageddon of property investing and home ownership. But it came to such a soft landing. It was a non-event. And the reason why that happened was people came off the back of good equity. A lot of them had fixed their loans, and most of them are starting to expire last year and this year. So the lower rates were there. So there could be a issue over here of people coming onto off fixed rates into a high interest rate climate. But then also, just as important, I think, is the fact that we, through COVID, before COVID, we've started to understand that we need to have buffers in place, especially for homeowners, especially for people that are just starting out to invest. That's something that most brokers are now coaching. And then when you look at the banks, when they lend you the money, they actually buffer your rate by 3%. Yeah, and this is something that APRA has not adjusted down since COVID. So
it's structurally manufactured into it.
It is manufactured in there. So there is a affordability factor of 3%. Where we're going to run into quite a bit of problem in this coming year, with coming into this climate of interest rate rises, inflation, and uncertain goods pricing, would be the people that are self-employed and they are self-certifying their affordability to pay the loans, and therefore they might not be, and the lender is not able to take everything into account to give the 3% buffer. And so they likely will be the ones that will suffer a bit. There is this opportunity right now as we ease into this season of uncertainty, is that you really need to, within reason, liquidate as much of your equity as position, pop it into an offset account, not in a redraw, in an offset account. The reason why you wouldn't want it in a redraw account is that the banks still have the ability to reduce your redraw amount. Whereas if it's sitting in an offset account, it is sitting in a savings account.
Let's have a chat of that really quickly. So if it's actually sitting in the redraw account, so inside the home loan, the bank can capitalise that into the loan.
Absolutely.
If they wanted to.
Yeah.
At
and
any
that has
time
happened.
with it.
That has happened.
So on what justification would they have to do that?
So they're saying that, well, you're ahead on your repayments and we want to reduce our exposure to the market. So let's say, the vision in the market and the prediction in the market is that the property prices will come down. And so therefore, I as a bank want to protect my position. So I'm going to reduce your redraw down to only 30% of its redraw amount. And that did happen during the GFC.
Did it actually happen? I didn't know that. Yeah.
Whereas people that were having their money in an offset account, the bank couldn't really touch it because technically it's a savings account, right? So this is where you need to be smart and very structured in your approach to releasing equity. And the reason you're releasing the equity is not necessarily to buy. It is the mindset, sleep at night factor to say, I've got a stash of cash sitting here. Fuel prices could go to $3. I'm okay.
Oh, yeah, $3.
No,
Could go to $4 though.
I know, right? Yeah.
Well, diesel is at least.
I'm okay. My interest rates has now barreled to 7.5%. I'm still okay because I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. We know that the higher interest rates don't last forever.
Yeah.
And historically, as I keep saying, it's 18 months. And so it just gives you that ability to weather the storm and come out the other side, because when you do come out on the other side, you will come into some very strong growth, right? Every time we've had a crisis, the immediate after effect after the crisis or the pressure is released is you have phenomenal growth, both in rent and equity. So if you're looking at buying a property right now and you're sort of thinking, you know what, if I bought a house, it'll bring in 20K negative cash flow, that'll redline me. Maybe it's a change of strategy. Maybe you need to buy a townhouse or villa that has got less exposure, better cash flow in comparison to the house. Yes, you're sacrificing a little bit of your growth, but a well-selected townhouse or villa, note that I'm saying townhouse and villa, not units, they are perhaps 10% less growth historically over a period. No, not every townhouse or villa will go up in value in line with houses, but you also need to bring into the equation the holding cost for that growth. So couple of adjustments we can make over here, right?
This is strategy adjustment. Yeah.
We were talking on the way, of a few clients that are sort of a little bit jittery, but they're not quite exposed. They're just reaching out to us to say, hey, what do I need to do? What opportunities? What can I do within my portfolio? For some, we're saying bring forward your constructions for your secondary dwellings. Yep, because we know the construction cost is going to increase. So bring that forward because you're now getting an extra rental income coming in. For others, we need to restructure our loans so that the principal and interest, you may be reverting it back to interest only before the banks change their tune, because that could happen, right, in an uncertain climate.
So this is things you do to be prepared for that time.
Yeah. And then also maybe it is a move from residential into commercial to buffer out. Maybe he's selling down a few.
So what happens when, let's say, we come into, like after COVID, the commercial properties were vacant for a while. Something like this happens and people work from home. What do we think of that time when that happens, let's say, or if that happens?
Yeah.
So would we be finding commercial properties at a bargain or not?
Possibly, but you really need to think about what asset type you're plugging in, right? We want something that is really recession proof, right? Your childcare centers, your medical centers, the ones with longer leases and where people would need those services. So certainly, whilst there are a few strategic office blocks that you would buy, I would stay away from that. Again, everything comes at a price, right? So what's the opportunity on it?
So you want to be in any environment like this, and back to design your decade, there's going to be periods of time of uncertainty.
Yes.
So you don't want to be vulnerable. Is
Correct.
the key, and this is the core sort of connector with this notion of resilience. Now, I think it's become very, very clear that housing affordability and interest rates and the price to build and everything, all of that comes downstream of geopolitics. And you think that we're isolated here in Australia, and I think this is a really sage reminder, is that we're not, because of a choke point in the Middle East, in the Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of the world's oil flows through. Most of that goes into Asia, and we're still relying on Asian refining for our oil. That we're hugely impacted. Now, you can keep up to date with the conflict in the Middle East. I keep pretty dialed into it, and the war could be over any day, any week, right? There's still a lot of uncertainty around how the war's being prosecuted, and no one can really get a clear read on what Donald Trump's sort of...
Especially with social media.
No one get a real read on what his absolute objectives are, and the objectives change by the day. But as we record, the Strait of Hormuz is still a challenging waterway. Some ships are getting through if you're friendly with Iran. If you're not friendly with Iran, there's no ships coming through. And you see now there's Australia's doing deals with Singapore to try and sort of shore up our oil resources. We sort of look to our sort of maybe trading partners like China, who we send a lot of stuff up to, are already been a bit restrictive around what they might send down. So even if this war finishes soon, the tail of this is going to be potentially years.
Yes.
Yeah, and there is talk already being thrown around and bandied around recession, global recession. This may thrust the world in the global recession. And what does that look like? Who knows, right? So resilience is key, and removing vulnerabilities is key.
Absolutely.
Now, we've been talking about this for nearly 10 years, Victor, around making sure that the best sort of portfolio is a resilient portfolio that can hold itself through any crisis, is largely self-reliant on its own cash flow, and you can hold it no matter what, right? So we've been talking about this. So this is that time.
This is that time.
Yeah.
This is the pod. This is really the pod system that we talk about of all the properties.
Let's talk about that again then. So this is about layering in resilience and strengthening your portfolio. So it's at the same time defendable and defensible, but it's also deployable, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you talk about the pod, the key property there for this phase in politics, economy, inflation is your get out of jail property, right? So this is the one that you can sell down at any point in time, regardless of the market, and still walk away with a wad of cash, right? So you're manufacturing the equity in this property. It's attractive to all types of buyers in all types of market, right? So that's your get out of jail card. Then you've got your cash flow property, then you've got your growth property, and then the generational property, right? Now, some of you may just have the get out of jail. Others may have your cash flow property already, but need to get the get out of jail property first, next, because you don't want to lose your cash cow. Yeah. So it comes back to looking at the game plan, looking at the cards that you have in your hand right now to say, okay, do I fold? And the reality of it, right? If you are really at red line right now, I would strongly suggest to fold. Yeah, bold claim.
What
yes.
does folding mean?
Folding means you sell down strategic assets or you liquidate the equity as much as you can because you're trying to buy yourself time to survive with as much equity, cash, and assets behind you to get into the next phase when it is favorable to you.
Yeah, but remember, you can't just fold without analyzing your portfolio. You've got to know where exactly you are, what you already have, and what opportunities are within what you already have, and how can you restructure or realign so that you don't necessarily have to fold. So, and at what stage are you at your portfolio building? So, I'm sure the listeners, whoever's listening, would like to know at what stage everybody is at in their portfolio. Have they already set up their pods, or have they already got a number of properties, and are they all working out fantastically well? If they're not, I'd really welcome everyone to have a portfolio review done, because that will tell you how you can restructure things and re-look at things and be prepared.
So, and no doubt the team at Right Properties have to do a portfolio review at any given time. Maybe this is the right time to do it. But so I think about this pod system, I think about this notion of resilience or removing vulnerabilities. It doesn't mean you have to do it, but it's really just the contingency that you can.
Yeah, and giving yourself the sleep at night factor. See, people make rash decisions when they're fearful. Right. And I did a podcast with one of my long-standing clients, Uday, last fortnight, and he was talking about fear, right? He was fearful in the beginning, but he wasn't sure what he was fearful about. And this is what's happening right now is
fear
people are
for
fearful.
Fear's sake.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So we really need to identify, okay, where's the fear coming from? Is it just simple uncertainty? So let's bring some certainty in the portfolio. In other words, liquidate your equity or restructure your mortgages. So giving yourself a contingency that you might not have to use, but the contingency is there. Or is it real fear because you know that you've redlined because you're chasing crowd? Because if you look at the flavor of 2025, it was chasing growth, chasing equity, chasing assets, right? The flavor for 2026 needs to be, given the current climate, chasing cash flow, correcting cash flow, putting buffers in place, and strategic buying, where your strategy is realigned slightly to take advantage of what's out there, plus also making sure that we don't get into that buying mode for the sake of buying and buying an asset that will then propel you into the next few years, given that we know with absolute certainty that after this crisis, it may be a 2-month crisis, it may be a 2-year crisis. After this comes some really good growth.
And you need to look at every single crises over the last sort of 40 years. And you can pretty much every 6-7 years you can
it's
sort of
predictable
factor something in. There is a period of growth subsequent to the crisis. But the point being, though, if you transact at the wrong time, you can actually get negative growth.
Absolutely.
So the point around a resilient portfolio is being able to hold it through the series of crises in order to get the upside.
That's true. Yeah. So you mentioned transacting at the wrong time. It's transacting on the wrong asset at the time. Yeah, because there is a difference. So what we're trying to say here is that for most of you, it's not really a time to take a pause, right? It is time to re-evaluate your strategy and move forward with certainty. for a select few, it may actually be a pause or a retreat. Yep. And the retreat could be that, okay, I was about to buy chasing growth, as in 2025 flavor. So I need to perhaps realign this or maybe stop that acquisition until we've got absolute certainty. Yes, you'll lose momentum, but you'll keep yourself safe.
So this all sounds good in theory, and what we're talking about are the what-ifs of how global economic forces and geopolitics actually translates into, a situation in Australia which isn't ideal immediately when it comes to property markets. Now, all this is compounded by the fact that running up into this most recent crisis, the war in the Middle East, or the oil shock, or the oil crisis as a result of it, the government was being pretty overt in its commentary towards reviewing property taxes. And we're now looking down the barrel of changes to the tax regime in relation to capital gains tax, whether they remove it completely and or sort of change the discount that you get. And the big question around that is whether or not it gets grandfathered or not. That is the big question.
It is the big question.
That is the big question.
And if you take an economic approach to this, it doesn't make sense to grandfather it, right? Because if we're then saying from the budget night in May that everything going forward is going to be subject to the new CGT regime, take them a decade to actually get meaningful money back in the coffers, right? So if you really look at it purely from a monetary point of view, it doesn't make sense to grandfather it. And I dare say, and I'm going to stick my neck out here, that it may not get grandfathered.
Well, asked me 3 weeks ago, I'd say we're certainly looking down the barrel of it not being grandfathered. Whether or not the stands will be softened as a result of all these other very complex and complicated things that have now come into realisation since the war in the Middle East started. So I'm still out. I still, instinctively, like, why would you impose such a significant change to the tax regime if you are not going to get the upside benefit of it straight away? Because the reality is that we're spending more than we're receiving. There's obviously a lot of discussions around the sort of windfall tax on gas and that sort of stuff, whether or not the government's going to be courageous and ambitious enough to try and tax those big companies when they've got such lobbying might and power. So property investors are a pretty easy game, and there's a sentiment sort of emerging against them.
As well.
It does. It gets a few votes against it. So they need the money now, right? So there's a good case why they would argue that they shouldn't grandfather it. Which isn't cool because you're changing the rules partway through the game.
That's true.
Like a lot of Australians, imagine you've been investing for 40 years, thinking this is my out and this is what my plan is. And it's going to be a lot of second and third order impacts if they choose not to grandfather or even change it in general. People are going to hold on the property longer.
That's true.
And who knows what's happens with
well, look, the other side of it is that given the geopolitical situation, they might put a pause on it, right? They may say, oh, you know what, maybe it's be too much of an upheaval. But if we're looking at it from an isolated, this is Australia point of view, they need to do something to get more money in. And like you said, property investors are usually the first cab of the rank.
Yeah, and even you see in the coalition, some coalition shadow ministers are starting to soften their stance on this. They're also starting to embrace some of this rhetoric around generational inequality and all this sort of stuff, right? Which is tough, right? You can't compare someone's chapter 2 with someone's chapter 8.
Exactly.
Right. But it's getting all wrapped up together and it's becoming, it's a really complicated situation. And you look at CGT, there's always been some mechanism for discounting CGT before. I think Howard chucked in his 50% blanket thing, right? They used to sort of work out how much was driven by inflation, how much wasn't. Inflation, imagine if inflation's sort of, what's well over the 2 to 3 target band at the moment. We saw inflation up at 7%. It's sort of, the peaks coming off the back of COVID. Imagine having to sit there as a boffin and try and work out how much of your property value has gone up during periods of time as a result of inflation versus by the market. So they just got to make it 50%, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's very fair that you should be paying tax on inflation.
No.
And this is the argument.
That's
This is the
the
argument for
argument,
the capital gains discount, right?
Yeah.
But it's a pretty complicated
It is.
thing to work out. Most strangers go, and then You get other sort of suggestions coming out of saying, we should tax investment income different to, the income you generate through your personal endeavors. Like it's such a complicated time.
Look, there is no right fix at the end of it. Whatever they do is not going to be popular with the people they directly impact, right? So ultimately, when we're investing, we know that the tax rules are a sovereign risk.
Yeah.
And if you're investing purely based on tax numbers and tax regimes, you're asking for trouble, right? Tax is a nice to have. So whether it's CGT, negative gearing, whatever discounts you're getting along the way, it is a nice to have, but you really need to do your figures based on bare basics that, everything you earning is going to be taxed.
Yeah, tax at the tax rate that you have. Reshmi. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I agree with what you said. Yeah.
Yeah, it gets very sort of tiresome and forgiving. And only this week I saw like it's constant, right? It's at a macro and micro level for property investors. You got all these big what ifs around the tax regime, and then you get into the mechanics of it all. I saw a thing come out this week, which was the ability to port your bond as a renter from property to property.
So that's a big change coming in New South Wales.
Yeah. So like this is the big deal, right?
Yes.
You think about this. So you have a tenant in your property and they move out and they want to move into another property, right? They can just move their bond directly, right?
Yeah.
So if they've left that property and you want to claim on that bond, right, you now need to claim it off the government, who will pay you the money, and then the government, from what I understand, will chase the tenant for the money. So all that says to me is that the government's going to make it very, very hard to claim on bonds.
Absolutely.
And the amount of time it'll
That's
take.
right. And you need it straight away, right, to fix it. Like imagine this is just more red tape for investors. They're going to the government. Oh, look, they've wrecked this wall. Nah, we're not paying that out. Nah, that was wear and tear. No, like, they're going to do everything they possibly can.
Absolutely. And watch the insurance premiums go up.
And watch the insurance premiums go up, right? So what are you going to do? You're going to claim on insurance. Insurers are going to hit it. So like this is what we're playing with as investors. Every step of the way, just bam,
something's there to stop you.
Something's
It's
there,
like,
just-
why are you being successful?
Well,
You gotta take something out of it.
there is a tax in Australia called a success tax.
Yep.
Yeah. And this is what it is.
Yeah. So like, again, this is all sovereign risk, right? Like you can't do anything about this stuff.
No.
You talk about building a resilient portfolio, but you're building it in a bubble of the things that you do have a mechanical ability to control, but there's so much out there you can't do. You can't control. You can't control. You can see the reason why a lot of people are going, no, I'm
too
done.
hard.
Too hard.
I'm out.
That's
I'm
why
done.
the basics have to, your fundamentals, everything that your strategy, all of that has to really be solid so that no matter what happens, you are successful at what you're trying to do and achieve what you're trying to achieve.
So the big question then is that, we've been sort of working together for 15 years around property investment, investing in property and talking about property investment.
Yeah. My psychology bill's pretty high.
I bet you it is. There just seems to be a lot less reasons today to be investing in property than what they did back then.
There are a lot.
You know
less-
what I mean?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you know why? Because we also have got a lot more information free flowing now.
Yes.
These changes, similar changes, were happening finance wise, and thought bubbles from politicians were happening before the advent of social media, where news is propagated really quickly. They were happening before as well, right? It's just that we now have a whole lot more visibility, and also there is a whole lot more want by the politicians to be able to step in without worrying about, okay, what's my voter confidence going to be? Because they can reverse it very quickly because of the way information is dished out.
Yeah, so it's always been happening. You
It's always
just
been happening.
haven't had awareness, and sometimes sort of lack of an awareness can be a strategic asset, right?
It is.
Because it can not cloud decision making, right? Like,
Yeah.
and it just feels harder. And I see that questioning a lot more, going like, like you make these decisions today to provide for tomorrow,
Yeah.
but tomorrow is just so uncertain because you just don't know how the rules of the game are going to change. So
Yep.
what else do you do? Like,
Yeah. Simple philosophy. Don't borrow tomorrow's troubles for today.
Don't borrow tomorrow's troubles for today's, Or the other one, today is the tomorrow that you worried about yesterday, right?
Yes.
That's another great one. My grandmother used to have that on a wall above her phone, which is great quote. Great quote. But so there's a war in the Middle East.
Yes.
Petrol's really expensive. Interest rates are on the way up.
CGT's coming in.
CGT's coming in. There may be changes to negative gearing.
Yes.
There might be capped at 2. You don't know. So there's all this stuff going on, right? And I think the repayments on home loans and investment loans is probably the biggest consequence for Australia. That's where it's like really going to hit them hard.
Yeah.
Consequentially, as a result of all these things. Now, the interest rate rise this month is not a consequence of the war in the Middle East. That was happening, and they reckon it was a bit of a line ball. I think it was 5-4. 5-4, and whether the RBA governor was the one that said,
I'm the
we're going
fifth.
to, but she's probably that's her job, right?
Yep.
I do know that you probably saw in the papers today. She bought a new holiday home on the same day the interest rates went up, and everyone's up in arms. I'm going, leave her alone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Just let her get on with it. She's not doing anything
Well,
wrong.
that's strategic.
Got a hard
So,
job.
She's then not taken the current hoo-ha into account, building up her own portfolio. So that's
the media can't help themselves going, she's already got 2 investment properties.
Yeah.
So what?
Yeah.
She's like everyone else trying to provide for retirement.
Exactly.
So you just get fatigued with it all, right? But we were saying it before this most recent rate rise, to at least be factoring in 2 more rate rises. I'd probably revise that and I'd be factoring in maybe 3 to 4.
3 to 4 easily.
Is where I'd be at. So assume a full percentage point.
And maybe it's not a 0.25. Maybe it's a 0.5.
Well, you never know. They may come out, and if inflation, again, it's a really blunt stick because it only affects part of the economy, interest rate changes, and it normally hurts those people who are probably the most vulnerable.
Correct.
And this is the argument against this as a sort of utility of changing economic policy and stuff. But what do you do if you're already underweight and underwater? You've got to. Is it time to?
It's time to bail.
Time to bail.
Time to bail. If you're already underwater, then don't delay. Right, you've got to stem the bleed really quickly.
Yeah.
But don't take a knee-jerk reaction either, right? You may feel that you're underwater, but there may be a few tweaks in the portfolio that you could do that will then reset everything and allow you breathing space to be able to weather the storm and see it out until the so-called crisis is averted, and then make decisions in a calmer space.
What about worst case scenarios, Reshmi? Because I sit there and already hear people talking about, and you may already be seeing it, people going, I'm going to sell some investment properties now before the May budget because they're going to be making changes to capital gains tax. So if I get a signature on a contract before that, I'm safe, and I'm essentially structurally grandfathering the CGD discount at 50%, right? Like, we don't know what's going to happen yet.
No.
And you hear everything from getting rid of it completely, which I don't think they would do, because there still needs to be an application of inflation, right? There's talk about it going to 33% discount. There's talk about going to 25% discount. So you can actually sit there and do the math yourself, right? What the consequence of that will be.
I think you'd be jumping in too quickly without, you not got to do your sums and work it out whether it's going to really make a difference or a huge difference in what's the, if you selling. If that didn't happen, didn't come into effect, then the opportunities that you're losing out on the other side as well.
Yeah,
That's
I think it's really important to have a chat with the accountant. So
Yes.
if you look at this, we're making a decision to offload the property because we want to beat the May change.
Yeah. Whatever that is.
Whatever that is.
Yeah.
No one knows. Yeah. So yet this has been our absolute brilliant year where we've earned the most. And let's say that the discount is down to 30%. From 50%, now it's down to 30%.
Yeah.
Right? So we're losing 20% of discount.
20% of the discount.
Yeah.
So rather than paying tax on
50%, we're paying on 70%.
Yeah.
So yet we're in a 48% tax environment right now because we've earned pretty good money. Yeah. If we sold now, we got to pay arguably by October the capital gains tax, right? Yet if you delayed it and had good conversations, the accountant and did some forward planning, and maybe your income wasn't that high next financial year, perhaps it's much of a muchness, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you then get to, if you sold 1st of July or the first few months of the financial year, you get to enjoy the whole money and utilize the whole money to offset loans, to do strategic moves with that money until it's time to pay the following October if you're PYG. So it's not just a matter of pull the trigger, sell because this change is coming. You need to look at the holistic picture and see what's the real impact to you.
Yeah.
Well, hot tip. I'm not going to do this, but I'm sure someone will do it. It's going to be probably one of the best kept secrets. What the government will do around CGT, right? Because have a look to see if politicians are selling investment properties. Seriously, someone will do this investigation.
Yes.
They're so compromised, right?
Yeah.
You think about it. If they're all out there selling their investment properties prior to 30th of June, or everyone's contracted on the 29th, because say it comes in probably be this in the start of the financial year. Are pollies selling investment are they doing it? People in the know are all those people in Treasury who are providing this information. Like, it's such a level of layer of compromise, right?
Maybe you can do true investigative journalism and find out.
I ain't got the
there's
appetite
enough
for
time.
it. I ain't got the time for it. And I just like, well, whatever. I don't really care. But something will happen.
Yes,
Something will happen.
It will.
Something will happen.
And I guess the message we're saying is don't do a knee-jerk reaction to all of these changes, all of this upheaval that's coming your way. Don't do a knee-jerk
Well, I know people
reaction.
that sold property in Queensland when
COVID hit.
when the Queensland government was
Oh,
going to
land
say
tax.
that they were
Land
going to
tax.
land tax your
Yeah.
whole
portfolio.
And I know you probably saw people
Yes.
selling and going, I'm
Yeah.
not paying land tax on everything. Just I hold one property in Queensland, but they're going to tax my whole, and which was the most idiotic thing I've ever heard. And we put an end to that pretty quickly.
Yes.
But I know people that sold as a result of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like just reactive response, going, I don't want part of that, I'm out. So anyway, these are big decisions and way beyond and above my pay grade. I'm just an investor trying to get ahead.
So am I. Can't predict the future.
Can't predict the
Can't
future.
predict the future. You just have to look at the worst case scenario that everything's going to go wrong, and does it still make sense? And have I got the money to make it
Hold
happen?
on.
Yeah.
Got the money to make it happen. Hold on. And if you can hold on, then you think about, well, how do I capitalize? And
Yes.
that's the
Yeah.
point. So
Yeah.
you guys are happy to talk all these strategies through. This is probably the right time for a
This
portfolio
is the right
review.
time for portfolio review. This is the right time. And if you are thinking of investing, it may be the right time to jump in, or it may not, right? So this is where the conversations happen with us in terms of keeping you safe from the various moving parts of property investing, and making sure that we take a strategic approach to it rather than just a ad hoc approach. And we're looking at it to build a portfolio, not buy a property. If you're looking to just buy a property, maybe you're heading for trouble.
Yeah, and we've spoken about this beforehand.
Yes.
Building a portfolio isn't buying property; it's actually building a portfolio and being strategic around it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nice one. Well, it's good to see you guys.
Thank
I
you.
don't want to be fearful on this. I don't want to be alarmist, but I think you need to be alert.
Just be alert and wait and see, sort of thing, and know your numbers. I think that's the
Know your
main
numbers.
thing.
Do your homework. Know
Yeah.
your numbers.
Yeah.
Know where you sit. Know where you're at. Know your capacity. And have a personal sense for your risk appetite.
Yes.
Right. It's in times of uncertainty. It's the bold and the brave sometimes do very well, but they also do their day. So
True.
anyway.
Yeah.
How do people find you, Reshmi? What's the plan?
The plan is they can go onto our website,
Yeah.
either download the ebook for Design Your Decade and get to learn more from there, or send us an inquiry through the web form, and that will be good to go from there.
Do you get to speak to Victor?
Eventually.
Eventually.
They-
They speak with Victor, but there's a lot of work that is involved in getting to speak to him. It's not like, oh, I want to inquire and I want to find out what he's got to tell me. No, there's a lot of work and homework you've got to do, and you've got to provide a lot of information. You go through a sort of a process, let's say, to get to really understand. What happens is when you speak with someone before speaking with Victor, you're already prepared. There's a lot more. You actually are in a better position when you talk to him. There's a bit more clarity, because people come in without much clarity. And so that first session brings in that clarity and sets things up so that when you do speak with him, you've got a really focused approach to what exactly you can do. So that's the way to do it.
And Victor, you're still on the tools.
I'm still on the tools.
Like you've probably been doing this
Too long.
too long, but as long as
Since
any other.
2001.
But you're still you're still functionally you're a buyer's agent.
Yep. Property strategies and buyers. So I do set the strategies, and then I vet the properties that come across. And I still get my hands dirty. I go out and negotiate properties as well.
Yeah.
It's something I enjoy doing.
So you're still doing the important bit, which is the buyer's agency bit. You're out there negotiating, identifying
Absolutely.
all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that is with the help of my team. I've got a fairly
yeah.
big team on the ground and in the office. So when I set a strategy, then they go out hunting for properties, and we have regular check-ins to say, okay, no, that won't do. That's not good enough. Or yes, this is good because of X, Y, and Z, and it suits this client.
Yeah.
So it comes as granular as that, and perhaps a little bit different to most other long-standing buyers agents out there, in the sense buyers agencies out there, in the sense that I'm still very much on the tools.
Yeah. It's good to be on the tools.
Yeah.
Keeps you close to the coalface. Yeah. I'm still on the tools, unfortunately.
Yes.
Doing all this, but it keeps me connected and engaged. Right? Like,
Yeah.
It's really, really cool. Nice one. Well, thanks for coming in, team.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you. This is Property Investing Insights of Right Property Group. Victor and Reshmi Kumar. Go and check the guys out. Right Property Group, RIGHT, propertygroup.com.au. I never called you guys RPG. I can't do it. No, I'm not an RPG guy.
Yep.
I don't-
You're
I'm happy
right,
to call you
property
that.
group guy.
Property Group. I'm old school. Thanks for tuning in. Remember, there's a whole bunch of other episodes connected with our Design Your Decade series. We've covered pretty much everything, but now we're actually covering in your decade of designing your property journey. You got to factor in crisis or crises, depending how many come through. So we've spoken about resilience and removing vulnerabilities in your portfolio. There's a really good reason why. It's at a point in time like this when there is crisis and uncertainty. So strap in. You'll be all right if you've done everything that we've been talking about over the last year or so in Design Your Decade. So get in touch with the team. If you've got any queries or questions, they'll help you out. We'll see you again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature, does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs, and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property, or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you.